In week 10, remix, what comes after remix, this week's reading was What Comes After Remix by Lev Manovich, and um, the whole article discusses how we currently are in a very remix-centered culture, but how it's more than just a time of remix. It's bigger than that. It's more of a remix era, as he says. And he begins by talking about how remix was once a very narrow definition, um, purely focused on um, music, and how it sort of grew from uh, a few people mixing songs to then people asking to remix songs, and then eventually to artists creating music purposely or creating music with in mind that it would be remixed, which happens today. Artists will release, especially electronic artists, will release music um, with their original song and then 5 other songs which are just remixes. It is a very integral part of the music industry. But he goes on to describe that it has expanded from just music. Um, it is now, he says it's now diffused. Now, he says, like, um, at the turn of the 21st century, it's now not just used in music, it's used for remix, is used for visual projects, software, literary texts, and he mentions that he uses electronic music and software as two um, key metaphors for culture today. He talks about how the whole idea of remix culture is a bit controversial in a way because a lot of the times it's seen as violating copyright law, um, even though the end product can be something just as creative. But the interesting thing is that it is widely accepted in the music industry as being a legitimate form. He makes a important note about the second part of the 1980s and early 1990s, how electronic pop had sort of grown, and then it became this mashup between video production and music videos, and then this created this new um, time and culture for music videos. Then that later took over in the visual culture of TV, and then the same things happened in other areas, like he discusses Photoshop, and After Effects had a similar effect on fields of graphic design and motion graphics, commercial illustration, and photography. And then when the World Wide Web came along, it um, redefined the electronic document as a mix of other documents, and everything became this remix. And that is when, well, he says, when remix culture finally came in. And at the end, he talks about what comes after remix. Will it even be possible to create something entirely new that doesn't rely on sampling? And he uses his personal anecdote of moving from Russia to the US, that just in a tiny, small amount of time, things change so much. So we could never really predict what will happen in remix culture. I would disagree with the fact that he uses sampling in music as a whole for remix culture, because I think that it began as he says, a very narrow definition. I don't think it can be applied entirely throughout all aspects of remix culture, although I think it does apply to some. But things like World Wide Web and the mashup of all documents and the web application remixes, I don't think apply to his metaphor.